Okay, so imagine, if you will, it's the 90s. Peak TV before we even called it peak TV, right? Sitcoms, dramas, teen shows, every network's throwing ideas at the wall.
And some of them, well, let's just say not all of them stuck.
Exactly. But those glorious failures, those one-season wonders, they tell a story, don't they?
Yep.
They tell us what audiences were ready for, what they weren't, and maybe even what they were afraid of.
It's like television anthropology. We're digging through the fossil record of TV history.
Love it. So first up on our excavation list, The Adventures of Brisco County Jr. I remember the commercials was that Bruce Campbell.
With his steampunk cowboy hat.
You got it. Bruce Campbell, already a cult icon, playing a Harvard-educated bounty hunter in the Wild West, but with futuristic gadgets. It was this crazy mashup of genres, Western, sci-fi, action, comedy, you name it, they threw it in. Hold on. Bruce Campbell, law degree A&D, fighting robots in the Wild West. They pulled out all the stops trying to make it a hit. 2-hour premiere, aired twice a week on different nights, the whole 9 yards.
They were really swinging for the fences with that one, so what happened?
Honestly, no one's really sure. Ratings were strong out of the gate, but then, poof, vanished. Maybe the genre bending was just too much for audiences back then, or maybe it was just too far ahead of its time. Today, with streaming and niche audiences, it might have found a home.
You know what? You're absolutely right. Can you imagine that show dropping on a streaming service now? The tweets alone would break the internet. But hey, that's the 90s for you, a time of bold experiments and even bolder fashion choices. Speaking of bold experiments, let's talk about Cop Rock. Because singing and dancing police officers, that's, a choice.
You can lock me up, throw away the key. It don't make no never mind to me.
Cop Rock is what happens when you try to make a gritty police procedural and a Broadway musical at the same time. And it's every bit as bizarre as it sounds. It sounds like someone took a bunch of TV tropes, threw them in a blender, and hit the puree button, and then somehow got it greenlit for network television.
You're not wrong. It's almost hard to believe it actually made it to air, but it did. For a whole 11 episodes.
11 episodes? That's like a season for some shows. I guess someone out there was watching.
It's one for the TV history books, that's for sure.
Or maybe the what were they thinking? Files. But, you know, in a way, you have to admire that kind of ambition, right? Even if it crashed and burned spectacularly. Which I guess is a good segue into our next show, Dead at 21. Because talk about ahead of its time, this show was basically predicting the future of tech paranoia way back in 1994.
It's like they had a crystal ball, saw Black Mirror, and said, hold my beer. Okay, so picture this. It's your 20th birthday, we're going. You're thinking cake, parties, maybe a new driver's license if you're feeling ambitious. Our main man, Ed, he gets a different kind of present. The news that he's got these microchips in his brain. Implanted when he was a kid.
Okay, that's a birthday surprise you don't forget, but also kind of creepy.
Total invasion of privacy, right? But it gets worse. See, the chips, they made Ed super smart, but they also came with an expiration date, his 21st birthday.
Talk about a ticking time bomb. They basically gave him a year to come to terms with his own mortality. I mean, I get stressed trying to decide what to have for dinner.
So Ed does what any rational person in his situation would do. He hits the road with his best friend to outrun his own death and try to take down the people who did this to him.
So it's a race against time, a sci-fi thriller, and a commentary on technology all rolled into one. And this was back when most people thought the cloud was something you saw in the sky, right?
Right. The internet was still a baby back then. Most people were rocking dial-up modems. Can you imagine trying to explain the concept of microchipping to someone who's still trying to figure out how to send an email?
It boggles the mind. But that's what makes this show so fascinating, right? It was tapping into these anxieties about technology that were just starting to bubble up. It's like they could see where things were headed.
Totally. But let's shift gears a bit from dystopian futures to something a little more wholesome. Let's talk about Ghostwriter. Because who didn't love a show about a friendly ghost who helped kids solve mysteries?
Oh man, Ghostwriter brings back some memories. I used to love how the ghosts communicated by like rearranging letters on cereal boxes and stuff.
It was such a cool visual, right?
Yeah.
Very creative. And it played on that fear of the unknown that kids have. You're trying to figure out a mystery and suddenly words are appearing out of thin air.
Plus, it wasn't just about solving spooky mysteries. They snuck in a lot of educational stuff too, right? Like vocabulary, grammar, that kind of thing.
Totally. They were masters at weaving in those educational elements without being preachy. Like, you were learning about sentence structure while also trying to decipher a cryptic message from a ghost.
But, all right, enough wholesome ghost stories. Let's talk about something a little more, shall we say, baffling. Baywatch, iconic, right? Sun, sand, slow motion, running in swimsuits. But then there's Baywatch Nights. Someone please tell me how this even happened.
Ah, yes, Baywatch Nights, the less glamorous cousin. It started out innocently enough. I mean, as innocent as a spin-off of Baywatch can be, I guess. You had the Hoff making guest appearances, some familiar faces, solving crimes on the beach.
So far, so good. What went wrong?
Well, apparently someone decided that solving mundane crimes wasn't exciting enough. So season 2 took a hard left turn. And I mean a hard left turn.
Don't leave me hanging. What kind of left turn are we talking about?
Think voodoo curses, vampires, sea monsters. Basically, they threw everything but the kitchen sink at it.
Wait, seriously? They put voodoo in Baywatch? That's amazing.
It's one of the great mysteries of television history. The ratings probably weren't what they'd hoped for, so they panicked and went for the shock value.
It's like they said, well, nothing else is working, so let's just throw some vampires in there and see what happens. And what did happen?
It crashed and burned, of course. The original Baywatch audience was probably completely confused, and I doubt they attracted too many new viewers with the whole supernatural angle. It's a cautionary tale about trying to be everything to everyone. You end up being nothing to no one. But you know what show didn't try to be everything to everyone and still became a cultural phenomenon?
Twin Peaks.
Twin Peaks. Now, there's a show that really got under your skin, even if you didn't fully understand what was going on. It's the ultimate cult classic, right? Twin Peaks was like a fever dream you couldn't shake. So atmospheric, so eerie, and David Lynch really knew how to mess with your mind.
For those who haven't taken a trip to Twin Peaks, what's the basic gist?
On the surface, it's a murder mystery. Homecoming queen, Laura Palmer, turns up dead, and this quirky FBI agent, Dale Cooper, rolls into town to investigate. But things get weird fast.
And by weird, we mean...
Think small-town secrets, supernatural forces, a log lady who talks to wood, and a whole lot of damn fine coffee and cherry pie.
And it's one of those shows that you really have to be there for, right? Like, trying to explain it to someone who hasn't seen it is almost impossible.
You just gotta watch it. The pacing was deliberate, the plot was twisty-turny, and it demanded your full attention. This was pre-binge watching, pre-DVR even.
If you missed an episode, you were basically out of the loop.
Exactly. But for those who committed, Twin Peaks was more than just a show, it was an experience. And its influence is still felt today.
Oh, absolutely. It paved the way for all those shows that play with genre, embrace the strange, and aren't afraid to get a little dark. Okay, last but not least, on our 90s TV journey, we got to talk about Mantis. A black superhero on primetime TV that was a big deal back then. What's the story?
Mantis had so much potential. It could have been huge. You had Dr. Miles Hawkins, a brilliant scientist paralyzed by a stray bullet who builds this high-tech suit that not only lets him walk again, but gives him super strength and agility.
So he's fighting crime, but also battling prejudice and overcoming adversity. Powerful stuff.
Absolutely. But somewhere along the way, the network got cold feet. They started making changes, toning down the social commentary, focusing more on the superhero stuff, less on the man behind the mask.
Classic case of Hollywood getting scared, right? They had this chance to do something truly groundbreaking, and they choked.
And sadly, Mantis became a shadow of what it could have been.
It's almost heartbreaking, you know? They had this opportunity to tell a meaningful story, and they dropped the ball. It makes you wonder how differently things might have turned out if they'd had the courage to tell the story they originally set out to tell. But hey, that's show business, right? So as we wrap up our deep dive into the weird and wonderful world of short-lived 90s TV, what have we learned? Anything.
I think it's a good reminder that even the shows that don't stand the test of time have something to teach us about creativity, about risk-taking, and yeah, maybe even about what not to do.
It's like that box of old photos in your attic. You might cringe at some of the fashion choices, but they tell a story. They capture a moment in time.
And just like those old photos, these shows, even the ones that flamed out, they remind us of how TV has evolved, how our tastes have changed, and how some things never really go out of style.
Like denim jackets. Seriously, they always come back. But for now, we're signing off. Thanks for joining us on this trip down memory lane. Until next time.